¿Puede una mentira construir un amor verdadero o está destinada a destruirlo? Un millonario de São Paulo estaba cansado de mujeres que solo veían su cartera, así que decidió algo radical: fingir que era pobre en cada cita a ciegas. Pero cuando conoció a una madre soltera que rechazó trabajos extras para no abandonar a su hija, supo que había encontrado algo real. Lo que no sabía era que ella también había rechazado a un hombre rico por razones que lo dejarían sin palabras. Cuando ambas verdades salieron a la luz, tuvieron que decidir si su amor podría sobrevivir al peso de los secretos. Quédate hasta el final para descubrir si la honestidad llegó demasiado tarde. Sebastián apagó el motor de su camioneta frente al pequeño restaurante del centro de São Paulo y se quedó mirando el volante por un momento largo. 36 años, dueño de 3 negocios exitosos que le generaban más dinero del que podría gastar en una vida. Y ahí estaba otra vez, preparándose para mentir desde el saludo. Se quitó el reloj de lujo que normalmente usaba en la muñeca izquierda y lo guardó en la guantera junto con su cartera de cuero italiano. En su lugar, tomó una cartera vieja de imitación que había comprado en la 25 de marzo, especialmente para estas ocasiones de teatro personal. Revisó su reflejo en el retrovisor y ajustó la camisa simple que compró en una tienda departamental la semana anterior. Nada de marcas reconocibles, nada que delatara su verdadera posición económica en esta ciudad donde el dinero hablaba más alto que las palabras. Afuera, las luces amarillentas de los carritos de pastel iluminaban la acera con ese brillo cálido que le recordaba su juventud humilde. En aquella época soñaba con tener dinero suficiente para invitar a una mujer a cenar sin calcular cada real gastado. Ahora que podía comprar el restaurante entero si quisiera, descubrió algo que el dinero jamás le advirtió cuando lo perseguía con desesperación. Tener todo significaba no saber quién te quería por ti mismo y quién veía apenas una oportunidad dorada con piernas. Las últimas 7 mujeres que conoció en aplicaciones de citas le enseñaron esa lección amarga con claridad brutal y sin espacio para dudas. La primera cambió completamente su actitud cuando él mencionó casualmente ser dueño de algunos negocios en la zona oeste. De repente, sus mensajes se volvieron más frecuentes, más cariñosos, llenos de planes futuros que ella nunca había insinuado antes. La tercera le pidió dinero prestado para una emergencia familiar en la segunda cita y desapareció cuando él sugirió acompañarla al hospital. La quinta llegó con una amiga sin avisar y pidió los platos más caros del menú como si estuviera en una competencia. La séptima fue la peor de todas, la que finalmente rompió algo dentro de él y lo empujó a tomar la decisión radical. Después de 3 meses saliendo, ella le confesó entre risas que solo estaba con él por su dinero y que jamás se habría interesado por él si fuera un hombre común. Lo dijo como si fuera la cosa más natural del mundo, como si el amor fuera apenas una transacción comercial donde ella ofrecía compañía y él pagaba por el privilegio. Sebastián terminó esa relación inmediatamente, pero las palabras quedaron grabadas como cicatrices invisibles en el alma. Esa misma noche tomó una dosis de cachaza en la terraza de su casa y decidió que nunca más dejaría que el dinero fuera protagonista de su vida romántica. Desde entonces, hace exactamente 4 meses y 11 días, si contaba con precisión obsesiva, Sebastián se presentaba en cada cita como conductor de Uber. Inventó una vida completa de clase trabajadora que memorizó hasta el último detalle para nunca contradecirse en las conversaciones. Vivía supuestamente en un departamento pequeño de alquiler en Vila Madalena. Compartía gastos con un compañero de cuarto imaginario llamado Carlos y lidiaba con deudas de tarjeta de crédito que lo mantenían despierto de noche, según su historia falsa. Conocía nombres de calles, problemas de tráfico, quejas sobre pasajeros groseros y carreras mal pagadas que un conductor real enfrentaría cada día. Practicaba frente al espejo el tono cansado de quien trabaja 12 horas diarias solo para sobrevivir mes a mes sin ahorros. Sus amigos cercanos pensaban que había perdido la cabeza con este experimento social que bordeaba lo ridículo e innecesario. Decían que eventualmente encontraría a alguien sin necesidad de mentir, que no todas las mujeres eran iguales a las que conoció antes. Pero Sebastián ya no confiaba en su propio juicio para distinguir intenciones genuinas de actuaciones perfectas diseñadas para engañarlo. Necesitaba la prueba definitiva. Ver cómo una mujer lo trataba cuando pensaba que no había nada material que ganar de la relación. Solo entonces, cuando estuviera seguro de haber encontrado algo real, revelaría la verdad completa y enfrentaría las consecuencias de su engaño calculado. Aquella noche de jueves marcaba su 10ª cita bajo identidad falsa y Sebastián ya había bajado sus expectativas hasta el sótano. Tomó su celular del tablero y revisó una vez más el perfil de Marcela mientras caminaba hacia la entrada del pequeño restaurante familiar. 29 años, según su descripción, peluquera en un salón del centro, madre soltera de una niña de 6 años llamada María. Las fotos mostraban a una mujer de sonrisa cansada pero genuina, sin esos filtros exagerados que transformaban rostros hasta volverlos irreconocibles en persona. No había listas de requisitos en su perfil, no exigía cierta altura o nivel económico o tipo de auto o profesión específica. Solo decía con honestidad simple que buscaba a alguien comprensivo y honesto porque su prioridad absoluta era su hija. Esa última palabra le provocó una punzada de culpa en el centro del pecho, considerando que estaba a punto de mentir desde el primer segundo, pero se recordó firmemente que esto era necesario, que la mentira temporal protegería algo más valioso que la verdad inmediata. Guardó el teléfono en el bolsillo trasero de su pantalón de mezclilla y empujó la puerta de vidrio del restaurante, donde lo recibió el aroma familiar de carne asada y pan en la plancha. El lugar era pequeño y acogedor, con manteles cuadriculados rojos sobre mesas de madera y un ambiente que le recordaba las loncherías de su infancia pobre. Escogió una mesa cerca de la ventana, desde donde podía vigilar la calle iluminada por postes antiguos y letreros de negocios que parpadeaban. Pidió apenas un refresco de guaraná al mesero, que se acercó con libretita en mano y sonrisa profesional de quien trabaja ahí desde hace años. No quería parecer desesperado pidiendo comida antes de que ella llegara, aunque su estómago rugía después de un día entero sobreviviendo con café y galletas. Observó a las familias en las otras mesas. Niños pequeños corriendo entre las sillas mientras sus padres conversaban y compartían platos humeantes que olían deliciosamente. Esto era exactamente lo que anhelaba en el fondo de su ser cansado, esa normalidad simple y bonita que todo su dinero no había logrado comprar en boutiques lujosas. Se preguntó si Marcela realmente llegaría o si sería una más que cancelaba a última hora con excusas vagas enviadas por mensaje cobarde. Revisó la hora en su teléfono básico que también compró para estas citas, reemplazando su smartphone de última generación que delataba demasiado. Afuera, un taxi viejo se detuvo frente al restaurante y de él bajó una mujer joven que miró el lugar con expresión evaluadora. Llevaba jeans simples y una blusa discreta sin marcas visibles. El cabello oscuro, recogido en una cola de caballo práctica de quien no tiene tiempo para peinados elaborados. Cargaba un bolso que claramente había visto días mejores y revisaba su teléfono con el ceño fruncido antes de caminar hacia la entrada. Sebastián supo inmediatamente que era Marcela, no por reconocer su rostro de las fotos, sino por esa manera particular de moverse que tienen las mujeres acostumbradas a hacer todo rápido y eficiente porque el tiempo nunca alcanza. Respiró hondo y enderezó su postura, preparándose para actuar una vez más en su obra de engaño, sin imaginar que esta mujer estaba a punto de romper todas sus reglas y cambiar su vida para siempre. Marcela entró al restaurante con pasos rápidos y mirada alerta que evaluaba todo en segundos precisos, como quien tiene cronómetro interno siempre funcionando. Sebastián se puso de pie y levantó la mano derecha para que lo identificara entre las pocas mesas ocupadas del lugar tranquilo. Ella caminó hasta él con una sonrisa educada, pero cansada, de esas que se dibujan en el rostro por cortesía más que por emoción genuina. Se saludaron con un apretón de manos breve que duró apenas 2 segundos incómodos, esa timidez universal de dos desconocidos que solo se conocen por fotos editadas y mensajes superficiales. Marcela se sentó frente a él y acomodó su bolso gastado en el respaldo de la silla con movimientos eficientes y automáticos de años. Sebastián notó sus manos pequeñas pero fuertes, con callos visibles en las palmas que contaban historias de trabajo duro, sin palabras necesarias. No llevaba anillos ni pulseras, ni accesorios llamativos de ningún tipo. Apenas un reloj de plástico simple que probablemente costó 50 reales en algún mercado. Su rostro mostraba signos claros de cansancio alrededor de los ojos castaños, pequeñas líneas que hablaban de noches cortas y días largos. Pero su sonrisa se volvió más genuina cuando finalmente lo miró directamente a los ojos y agradeció con voz suave que él hubiera escogido un lugar cerca de su casa. Había algo honesto en su manera de hablar, sin esos filtros sociales que la mayoría usa para impresionar en primeras citas formales. Antes de que Sebastián pudiera responder o preguntar qué quería pedir, Marcela sacó su teléfono del bolsillo y revisó la hora con gesto automático. Explicó con honestidad desarmante y sin vergüenza alguna que solo podía quedarse 1 hora y media como máximo, porque su hija María estaba con la vecina. Dijo que doña Conceição era muy gentil cuidándola ocasionalmente, pero no le gustó de una mentira construir un amor verdadeiro, ou está destinada a destruí-lo. Milionário de São Paulo estava cansado de mulheres que só viam sua carteira. Assim decidiu algo radical, fingir que era pobre em cada encontro às cegas. Mas quando conheceu uma mãe solteira que recusou trabalhos extras, de quero que refaça essa história em inglês, mantém exatamente a mesma história, só que traduzida para o inglês, não quero que separe por capítulos. Quero texto único pronto para narração. 20% paid par complete story in English. Can a lie build true love, or is it destined to destroy it? A millionaire from São Paulo was tired of women who only saw his wallet. So he decided something radical: pretend to be poor on every blind date. But when he met a single mother who refused extra work to not abandon her daughter, he knew he had found something real. What he didn't know was that she had also rejected a rich man for reasons that would leave him speechless. When both truths came to light, they had to decide if their love could survive the weight of secrets. Stay until the end to discover if honesty came too late. Sebastião turned off the engine of his pickup truck in front of the small restaurant in downtown São Paulo and stared at the steering wheel for a long moment. 36 years old, owner of 3 successful businesses that generated more money than he could spend in a lifetime. And there he was again, preparing to lie from the very greeting. He removed the luxury watch he normally wore on his left wrist and stored it in the glove compartment along with his Italian leather wallet. In its place, he took out an old imitation wallet that he had bought at 25 de Março, especially for these occasions of personal theatre. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror and adjusted the simple shirt he bought at a department store the previous week, No recognizable brands, nothing that would reveal his true economic position in this city where money spoke louder than words. Outside, the yellowish lights of the pastel carts illuminated the sidewalk with that warm glow that reminded him of his humble youth. Back then, he dreamed of having enough money to invite a woman to dinner without calculating every real spent. Now that he could buy the entire restaurant if he wanted, he discovered something that money never warned him about when he pursued it with desperation. Having everything meant not knowing who wanted you for yourself and who saw only a golden opportunity with legs. The last 7 women he met on dating apps taught him that bitter lesson with brutal clarity and no room for doubt. The first completely changed her attitude when he casually mentioned owning some businesses in the West Zone. Suddenly, her messages became more frequent, more affectionate, full of future plans she had never hinted at before. The third asked him for loan money for a family emergency on the second date and disappeared when he suggested accompanying her to the hospital. The fifth arrived with a friend without warning and ordered the most expensive dishes on the menu as if she were in a competition. The seventh was the worst of all, the one who finally broke something inside him and pushed him to make the radical decision. After 3 months of dating, she confessed to him between laughs that she was only with him for his money and that she would never have been interested in him if he were a common man. She said it as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as if love were merely a commercial transaction where she offered companionship and he paid for the privilege. Sebastião ended that relationship immediately, but the words remained engraved like invisible scars on his soul. That same night, he had a shot of cachaça on the terrace of his house and decided that he would never again let money be the protagonist of his romantic life. Since then, exactly 4 months and 11 days if he counted with obsessive precision, Sebastião presented himself at each date as an Uber driver. He invented a complete working-class life that he memorized down to the last detail to never contradict himself in conversations. He supposedly lived in a small rented apartment in Vila Madalena. He shared expenses with an imaginary roommate named Carlos and dealt with credit card debts that kept him awake at night, according to his false story. He knew street names, traffic problems, complaints about rude passengers and poorly paid rides that a real driver would face every day. He practiced in front of the mirror the tired tone of someone who works 12 hours a day just to survive month to month without savings. His close friends thought he had lost his mind with this social experiment that bordered on the ridiculous and unnecessary. They said he would eventually find someone without needing to lie, that not all women were like the ones he met before. But Sebastião no longer trusted his own judgment to distinguish genuine intentions from perfect performances designed to deceive him. He needed definitive proof. To see how a woman treated him when she thought there was nothing material to gain from the relationship. Only then, when he was sure he had found something real, would he reveal the complete truth and face the consequences of his calculated deception. That Thursday night marked his 10th date under false identity, and Sebastião had already lowered his expectations to the basement. He grabbed his cell phone from the dashboard and checked Marcela's profile once more as he walked toward the entrance of the small family restaurant. 29 years old, according to her description, a hairdresser at a downtown salon, single mother of a 6-year-old girl named Maria. The photos showed a woman with a tired but genuine smile, without those exaggerated filters that transformed faces until they became unrecognizable in person. There were no lists of requirements on her profile. She didn't demand a certain height or economic level or type of car or specific profession. She just said with simple honesty that she was looking for someone understanding and honest because her absolute priority was her daughter. That last word caused a pang of guilt in the center of his chest, considering he was about to lie from the first second, but he firmly reminded himself that this was necessary, that the temporary lie would protect something more valuable than immediate truth. He put the phone in the back pocket of his jeans and pushed open the glass door of the restaurant, where he was greeted by the familiar aroma of roasted meat and bread on the griddle. The place was small and cozy, with red checkered tablecloths on wooden tables and an atmosphere that reminded him of the diners from his poor childhood. He chose a table near the window, from where he could watch the street illuminated by old posts and blinking business signs. He ordered just a Guaraná soda from the waiter, who approached with a notepad in hand, and the professional smile of someone who had worked there for years. He didn't want to seem desperate by ordering food before she arrived, although his stomach rumbled after an entire day surviving on coffee and cookies. He observed the families at the other tables, small children running between chairs while their parents conversed and shared steaming plates that smelled delicious. This was exactly what he longed for, deep in his tired being, that simple and beautiful normality that all his money hadn't managed to buy in luxurious boutiques. He wondered if Marcella would really arrive, or if she would be another one who cancelled at the last minute, with vague excuses sent by cowardly message. He checked the time on his basic phone, which he also bought for these dates, replacing his latest generation smartphone that revealed too much. Outside, an old taxi stopped in front of the restaurant, and a young woman got out who looked at the place with an evaluating expression. She wore simple jeans and a discreet blouse without visible brands, her dark hair tied in a practical ponytail of someone who doesn't have time for elaborate hairstyles. She carried a purse that had clearly seen better days and checked her phone with a furrowed brow before walking toward the entrance. Sebastião immediately knew it was Marcella, not by recognizing her face from the photos, but by that particular way of moving that women accustomed to doing everything quickly and efficiently have, because time never reaches. He took a deep breath and straightened his posture, preparing to act once more in his work of deception, without imagining that this woman was about to break all his rules and change his life forever. Marcella entered the restaurant with quick steps and alert gaze that evaluated everything in precise seconds, like someone with an internal timer always running. Sebastião stood up and raised his right hand so she could identify him among the few occupied tables in the quiet place. She walked toward him with a polite but tired smile, one of those drawn on the face out of courtesy more than genuine emotion. They greeted each other with a brief handshake that lasted only 2 uncomfortable seconds. That universal shyness of two strangers who only know each other through edited photos and superficial messages. Marcella sat in front of him and arranged her worn bag on the back of the chair with efficient and automatic movements of years. Sebastião noticed her small but strong hands, with visible calluses on the palms that told stories of hard work without necessary words. She wore no rings, no bracelets, no flashy accessories of any kind, just a simple plastic watch that probably cost 50 reais at some market. Her face showed clear signs of fatigue around her brown eyes, small lines that spoke of short nights and long days. But her smile became more genuine when she finally looked directly into his eyes and thanked him with a soft voice for choosing a place near her house. There was something honest in her way of speaking, without those social filters that most use to impress on formal first dates. Before Sebastião could respond or ask what she wanted to order, Marcella took her phone from her pocket and checked the time with an automatic gesture. She explained with disarming honesty and without any shame that she could only stay an hour and a half at most because her daughter Maria was with the neighbor. She said that Dona Conceição was very kind, taking care of her occasionally, but she didn't like to abuse her kindness or arrive too late to pick her up. Sebastião nodded and responded that he understood perfectly, although inside he felt growing curiosity about that girl, who was clearly the center of the maternal universe. Marcella seemed to relax a bit at his understanding response and left the phone on the table where she could see any urgent call. She picked up the menu that the waiter had just placed in front of her and began reading it with concentrated tension that went beyond hunger. Her eyes moved quickly from one dish to another, stopping at the small numbers indicating prices on the right side. Sebastian watched her make visible mental calculations in the micro-expressions of her tired face, adding and subtracting as those who live with tight budgets do, where every real counts. When the waiter returned with his clipboard ready to take notes, Marcella ordered only a grilled cheese sandwich with natural orange juice. It was the most economical item on the menu after coffee with French bread, but she said it without any shame or unnecessary apologies. She accepted her economic reality with a natural dignity that seemed more elegant to Sebastian than any expensive dress from an exclusive boutique. He ordered exactly the same thing to not make her feel uncomfortable or judged for her austere choice. And the waiter went off to the kitchen. The conversation began with that typical formality of first dates, where both test the ground before risking real honesty. Marcella told him she had worked at the beauty salon Charm and Style for 5 complete years, that she had learned the trade directly from her aunt when she was only 18 years old, just turned. She spoke with genuine pride about her work. She mentioned regular clients she now considered almost friends after years of shared confidences. She explained how she liked making women feel beautiful when they arrived, tired from their own exhausting and endless routines. Her voice became animated when describing hairstyle transformations, perfect dyes, the sincere gratitude in the eyes of her satisfied clients. Sebastian maintained his rehearsed story word for word, presenting himself as an Uber driver for 3.5 years. He invented anecdotes about peculiar passengers that he had practiced in front of the mirror. He complained about the infernal São Paulo traffic that he knew by heart. He mentioned with a resigned tone, perfectly acted, the card debts that supposedly kept him awake, calculating impossible numbers every night. He described the rented apartment in Vila Madalena that ate more than half his monthly salary without mercy. He spoke of postponed dreams of having his own business someday distant, goals that moved away each month with new invented financial emergencies. Marcella listened with real and genuine attention, without that glazed and lost look of someone who only waits their turn to talk about themselves. She asked specific questions about his work. She nodded with deep understanding. When he described economic difficulties, she clearly knew firsthand. There was no condescending pity in her calm expression, only horizontal empathy from someone who walks the same rocky terrain every day. She commented that she also had a card with a balance that grew faster than her monthly payment capacity. She mentioned that sometimes she robbed from one saint to pay another, doing financial juggling that required constant mathematical creativity. The waiter brought the grilled cheese sandwiches, steaming on simple white china plates, and both ate with honest hunger of workers. Sebastian asked her if she had family nearby, who supported her with Maria, and Marcella gently shook her head. She explained she was an only child, that her mother had died of cancer when Maria was only 2 years old. Her father remarried the following year and moved to Rio de Janeiro with his new young wife. She spoke of this without unnecessary drama or search for compassion. She merely reported facts she had processed and accepted in time. She said her father called occasionally and sent some money at Christmas, but basically, she and Maria were alone in this world. Then, with a completely different brightness illuminating her tired eyes, she began talking about her daughter with pure love. She told how Maria was her main motor and her absolute reason for getting up every morning at 5:30, no matter how exhausted she was. She described how the girl was in first grade and loved drawing princesses and animals with bright colors on any available paper. She mentioned that every night without exception, she asked her to read a story before sleeping, even though Marcella arrived destroyed from work. She explained how those 20 minutes of shared reading were sacred and non-negotiable in her daily routine, the best moment of her complete day. Sebastião listened completely fascinated, not so much by the anecdotes themselves, but by the visible physical transformation in Marcella. All the fatigue magically disappeared from her face when she spoke of her daughter, replaced by a radiant light impossible to fake. Her shoulders straightened, her voice became stronger and more secure. Her eyes shone with that special intensity that only truly dedicated parents have. It was absolutely evident that this woman was not looking for an economic savior who would solve her financial problems with generous and impersonal checks. She was looking for someone to accompany her in the life she had already built, with effort upon sweat and unconditional love for her daughter. Marcella's phone vibrated noisily on the wooden table, and she looked at it with a conflicted expression that mixed duty and desire. The illuminated screen showed Gabriella's name, and Sebastião saw how Marcella's fingers hesitated over the answer button before making a decision that would completely change his perception of her forever. Marcella looked at the illuminated screen of her phone for 3 long seconds that seemed to stretch like hours in Sebastião's observant mind. Gabriella's name blinked insistently with each vibration that shook the device against the wooden table of the family restaurant. He saw how her fingers moved to the answer button by automatic reflex of years working always available. But then Marcella took a deep breath, pressed her lips in a firm line of decision made, and declined the call with a quick movement. She put the phone in her purse without even looking if there was a voicemail or urgent follow-up text sent. Sebastião asked with genuine curiosity if it was something important she needed to attend immediately, offering to leave if necessary without problem. Marcella shook her head and smiled with that mixture of fatigue and firmness he was already beginning to recognize as characteristic. She explained it was Gabriella, her boss at the beauty salon, probably calling to offer her to cover extra weekend shifts that always remained empty. She said with calm but determined voice that she no longer accepted those additional jobs, although the money was very much needed every month. She preferred to be with Maria on complete Saturdays and Sundays, see her play, help her with homework, simply exist together without rush or clocks marking obligations. Sebastião felt something move deeply in his chest, a strange emotion he couldn't immediately identify among all his years of superficial relationships. It was admiration mixed with respect and something bigger that didn't have an easy name in his emotional vocabulary limited by money. Here was a woman who chose time over reais, presence over bank accounts, love over economic opportunities that others would kill to have. He asked her, trying to sound casual, if she had ever been offered better positions at the salon where she had been working for 5 years. Marcella nodded while biting a piece of grilled cheese that she chewed slowly before responding with her characteristic honesty. She told that exactly 6 months ago, her boss proposed she be the night shift manager with a considerable monthly salary increase. She would be responsible for closing the salon, supervising new hairdressers, managing the cash register money, everything that implied more responsibility and better payment. But the hours were from 4 in the afternoon to 11 at night, Tuesday through Saturday, without possible exceptions. It meant leaving Maria with the neighbor all those afternoons and nights, missing dinners together, not being there to help her with math or science. She refused the offer without thinking twice, without consulting anyone, without calculating how much extra money it meant for her always tight and stressful budget. She explained with soft but rock-firm voice that no amount of money in the world would be worth missing those moments with her little daughter. The shared dinners where Maria told her everything about her day at school, new friends, drawings she made in art class, the school homework they did together at the kitchen table while eating cookies and drinking hot chocolate that Maria loved. The conversations before sleeping, where the girl shared her dreams, her childhood fears, her questions about why she didn't have a daddy like other children. Marcella said those moments were the only thing that really mattered in her life, the only thing that gave meaning to waking up every exhausted morning. Money came and went, jobs appeared and disappeared, but she would only be a child once in her short life. She would only be 6 years old during these 12 months that passed flying without asking permission to stop for a second. Sebastião listened to every word, as if it were the first time someone explained to him what it really meant to have correct priorities in life. For years, he had known people who said they loved their families but worked 80 hours a week chasing more and more money. He had seen friends miss their children's birthdays for business meetings that could wait but never waited. He himself had sacrificed relationships and moments to build his business empire that now left him empty and alone, seeking false love. But Marcela was different in a way that shook him to the foundations of everything he believed he knew about life and people. She didn't preach values while doing the opposite in daily practice. She didn't talk about family while pursuing selfish ambitions without limit. She lived her convictions every day, with real and painful sacrifices that most wouldn't be willing to make ever in their lives. She refused money for time, promotions for presence, opportunities for love, without regretting or complaining about what she lost economically each month. Sebastião understood in that precise instant that his test had ended without him planning it that suddenly. Marcela had not only passed his exam designed to filter gold diggers, but had completely shattered the very concept of the exam with her existence. She wasn't interested in his money because she didn't even know that money existed hidden behind his perfect performance. She wasn't looking for a man who would solve her financial problems with generous checks and unlimited credit cards without questions. She was looking for something infinitely more difficult to find in this modern world, obsessed with material success and bright appearances. She was looking for a life companion who understood that truly valuable things aren't bought in exclusive department stores nor measured in bank accounts. And Sebastião realized with painful clarity that he was lying to her precisely about this, about who he really was beneath the designed mask. The conversation continued flowing with surprising naturalness for a first date between two strangers who had only known each other for an hour. Marcela asked him about his dreams beyond daily work that consumed them both without mercy or true rest. Sebastião carefully improvised that he would like to someday have a small mechanic shop of his own, something simple where he could be his own boss. He said he liked cars, although he didn't really understand much about engines, inventing on-the-go details that sounded credible and humble. Marcela smiled and shared that she dreamed of eventually opening her own beauty salon in some quiet neighborhood of the city. Nothing big or pretentious, just a welcoming place where she could work her own hours and be available when Maria needed her always. She spoke of this dream with shining eyes, but without false illusions, aware it required capital she didn't have, nor would have soon. Time flew by. Between finished grilled cheese sandwiches and orange juices the waiter refilled kindly, without charging extra for the service. Sebastião was surprised when Marcela checked her phone and exclaimed that more than the hour and a half she had promised had already passed. She apologized, saying she had to go get Maria before Dona Conceição worried about the unexpected delay. Sebastião quickly asked for the check, and when it arrived, both took out their wallets in a simultaneous and instinctive movement of people accustomed to paying their share. But in that simple gesture of shared wallets, Sebastião knew with absolute certainty that he had just met the only woman he had been looking for during years in all the wrong places. 3 days after that first date that left him thinking about every word exchanged, Sebastião found himself driving to Ibirapuera Park with a strange emotion revolving in his stomach like nervous butterflies. He had exchanged messages with Marcela every night after both their work. Simple conversations about their tired days, but which he waited for with adolescent anxiety. She told him funny stories about demanding clients at the salon. He invented anecdotes of impossible passengers in his fictitious work as a driver. When he finally dared to propose a second date, Marcela accepted, but with one non-negotiable condition he never expected to hear. She said this time Maria would come with her because she didn't want to leave her again with the neighbor during the weekend. She explained that if Sebastião really wanted to know her, he had to also know the most important person in her entire life, without exceptions. Sebastião accepted immediately, although his heart beat with panic force at the idea of meeting a 6-year-old child. He had no experience with children. He had never spent time with nephews or friends' children. His adult world revolved around business and money exclusively, but he perfectly understood that this was the real test Marcella was putting him through without saying it with direct and obvious words. If he didn't accept or tolerate Maria, then there was no possible future between them two in any conceivable way. He parked his pickup far from the playground area, where they had agreed to meet at 11 in the morning under the hot sun. He walked along the cement trail, observing the families enjoying the quiet Saturday, children running to swings while parents watched from benches. He saw Marcella from afar, sitting on a green-painted wooden bench next to a small girl with dark hair in 2 perfect braids. The girl wore a simple flowered dress and sneakers that had seen better days, but were clean and well cared for. Sebastião approached with steps that tried to seem confident, although inside he felt nervousness he hadn't experienced in years in any situation. Marcella stood up when she saw him and smiled with warmth that reassured him a bit, introducing him to Maria with a soft voice. The girl looked at him with those enormous, evaluating eyes that children have, capable of seeing truths that adults hide with social masks. Sebastião crouched to be at her height and greeted her with genuine respect, without that condescending tone many adults use with little ones. Maria responded with a shy hi and hid a bit behind her mother's legs in a natural protective gesture. Marcella caressed her hair with tenderness and said not to be afraid, that Sebastião was the gentleman she had talked about during the week. The 3 walked to the playground area, where Maria finally let go of her mother's hand to run to the swings with childish energy. Sebastião and Marcella sat on a nearby bench, from where they could watch her constantly without losing sight of her for a single second. He observed how Marcella followed every movement of her daughter with unbreakable maternal tension, ready to jump if something went wrong. They talked about trivial things while Maria played, but the real communication happened in what was said between casual words and comfortable pauses. After 20 minutes, Maria came running back with red cheeks from exercise and asked for water from her little backpack. Marcella took out a bottle and the girl drank with intense thirst before looking at Sebastião with less shyness than before. She asked with that direct curiosity of children if he also drove a car like a real driver or just talked. Sebastião smiled at the innocent question and confirmed yes, that he worked driving every day through the city, taking people to different places. Maria nodded, satisfied with the answer, and then asked if he had ever carried a princess in his work car. The question caught him off guard, and Marcella laughed softly at her daughter's idea, explaining that Maria was obsessed with princesses lately from the movies they watched together. Sebastião responded with unexpected sincerity that he had never carried a princess, but today he had met a very special one in this park. Maria smiled shyly at the compliment, and Sebastião felt something warm expand in his chest, seeing that childish and genuine smile. The girl asked if he wanted to see her new drawing she had brought in her backpack to show her mother after playing. Sebastião said he would love to see it, and Maria carefully took out a sheet of paper, folded several times to fit in the small space. She unfolded it with pride, revealing a drawing made with bright-colored crayons, where 3 figures holding hands smiled under a yellow sun. A tall woman, a small girl in the middle, and a man at the other end that Maria pointed to, explaining they were her mother, herself, and her favorite teacher from school. Sebastião felt a strange pang in his heart, noticing the girl drew paternal figures she didn't have in her real daily life. Marcella also noticed, and her expression became melancholic for a brief moment, before smiling and telling Maria it was a very beautiful drawing. The girl asked if she could go to the swings again, and Marcella nodded, warning her to be careful not to fall like last week. Maria ran again to the playground area, and Sebastião took the opportunity to ask Marcela about the girl's father with delicacy. Marcela sighed and explained with calm voice that he left when he found out about the pregnancy 7 years ago. He never met Maria, nor showed any interest. She said at first it hurt her terribly, but now she was grateful that such a man wasn't in her little daughter's life. They spent the next hour playing with Maria, pushing her on the swings, helping her climb on the seesaw that was too high for her alone. Sebastião surprised himself genuinely enjoying the company of that girl who talked non-stop about her school, her friends, her favorite cartoons. There was no pretense in Maria. No mental games or hidden agendas, just the brutal and refreshing honesty of childhood he had forgotten existed. When they finally sat down, the three on the bench to rest and eat the sandwiches Marcela had prepared that morning, Maria asked Sebastião if he knew how to do difficult math problems. He responded yes, and the girl immediately took out her homework notebook from the backpack, explaining she had additions and subtractions for Monday. Marcela apologized, saying Maria always carried her notebooks everywhere in case she had free time to get ahead. Sebastião took the notebook carefully and sat with Maria on the grass to review the exercises together under the shade of a large tree. He helped her patiently with each problem, explaining simple tricks to add large numbers in her head without using fingers. Maria listened with absolute attention, asking intelligent questions that showed she really wanted to learn and not just pass time with him. Marcela watched them from the bench with an expression on her face that Sebastião couldn't see, but that she didn't try to hide either. It was a mixture of hope and fear, of wanting to believe but having scars from previous disappointments that still hurt on lonely nights. When Maria finally finished all her homework and hugged Sebastião, thanking him for the help, he understood that for the first time in his adult life, he was being seen as a normal man with his heart and not as a millionaire with his wallet. The following weeks passed like a beautiful dream, from which Sebastião didn't want to wake ever in his entire perfect life. They saw each other 3 or 4 times a week, always simple encounters that didn't require much money but lots of shared heart. Walks through the historic center of São Paulo, where Maria ran ahead pointing at old buildings and pigeons that flew away scared by her childish energy. Afternoons at Marcela's modest apartment, where the three cooked simple recipes together, while Maria told endless stories from her school. Sundays in different parks, exploring every green corner of the city that seemed new under this light of nascent love. Sebastião found himself buying ice cream from carts instead of desserts from expensive restaurants, playing in public squares instead of exclusive private clubs, and discovered something he never imagined possible in his 36 years of life chasing material success without true rest. He was happier eating a 5 real coccinha on the sidewalk with Marcela and Maria than at any elegant dinner with previous women. He laughed more helping Maria with her science homework than in all the business meetings of the last 5 years combined. He slept better after saying goodbye to them with a chaste kiss on Marcela's cheek than in his huge empty bed with Egyptian sheets. The money he had pursued so much no longer mattered when he was with those two in simple and perfect moments. But the lie grew like a dark shadow that followed him everywhere without letting him breathe calmly for a single second of the day. Every time Marcela spoke of her economic difficulties, every time she refused to go somewhere because it was too expensive for her tight budget, every time Maria asked for something in a store, and her mother explained with patience that this month the money wasn't enough, Sebastião felt the weight of his deception like stones accumulating on his chest until he could barely breathe with apparent normalcy. He wanted to confess everything 1,000 times. The words burned his throat, demanding to come out and free him from this self-imposed prison of lies. But fear paralyzed him every time he opened his mouth to say the absolute truth that would change everything between them. Fear of losing them both. of seeing disappointment in Marcella's eyes, of hearing Maria ask why he had lied so much. Fear that she would think everything had been a cruel game of a bored millionaire amusing himself with poor people. Fear that the love that was flourishing between them would wither and die upon discovering the falsehood on which it was built. His friends noticed the change in him. They saw him more distracted in business meetings he used to lead with obsessive passion. They asked him what was wrong, and he couldn't explain he was falling in love with a woman while lying to her about who he really was. One night his best friend Ricardo told him directly that he had to confess the truth before it was too late, and the damage irreparable. But Sebastião kept postponing the confession day after day, week after week, trapped in the perfect moment that never arrived opportunely. He had grown too accustomed to being just Sebastião the driver, the simple man who struggled to make it to the end of the month working hard. He liked how Marcella looked at him, without that calculating shine he saw in other women when they discovered his real and abundant money. He adored how Maria treated him like a normal friend, and not like a potential benefactor who could buy everything for her. For the first time in years, he felt valued for who he was inside, and not for what he possessed in his bank account. And that sensation was so addictive and powerful that he didn't want to give it up, even though he knew he was building on quicksand. One Friday afternoon, after picking up Maria from school and taking them for ice cream at the market, Marcella confessed something to him that hit him like a direct punch to the stomach. She said she was seriously thinking about renting a small space she saw available near her house to open her own beauty salon. Her eyes shone with that cautious hope of someone who dares to dream, but knows dreams cost money she doesn't have available. She explained she had been saving little by little for 2 years, keeping every extra real she got without spending it on anything unnecessary or superfluous. She had already gathered a small but significant amount, enough perhaps for the first month's rent and some essential basic materials. Marcella took his hand on the plastic table at the ice cream stand and looked directly into his eyes with vulnerability she rarely showed. She asked with soft but serious voice if he would be willing to accompany her in this risky adventure of her own business. She definitely wasn't asking him for money. She made that absolutely clear from the beginning of the conversation to avoid uncomfortable and painful misunderstandings. She just wanted to know if he would be up for growing slowly with her, step by step, reel by reel, building something together from zero. She said she wasn't looking for a rich man who would solve all her financial problems with a generous and impersonal bank check. She was looking for a life companion who understood the value of shared effort, of small victories celebrated together with genuine joy. Someone who wouldn't give her everything done, but who would walk by her side on the difficult and rocky path forward. Sebastião felt something break inside his chest, a mixture of deep love and devastating guilt that drowned him without mercy. Here was the perfect woman he had looked for during years, offering exactly what he always wanted to find in someone honest and real. And he was lying to her about the only thing she asked of him, that he be truthful with her at all times, without exceptions. He opened his mouth to confess everything right there, to say he was a millionaire and could give her the complete space without it costing him anything. But the words got stuck in his throat, closed by panic, imagining her reaction of deep and painful betrayal. How to explain he had deceived her for entire months while she opened her heart to him with brutal honesty? He closed his mouth and nodded in silence, saying, of course, that he would be up for growing with her, that he would love to be part of her dream built together. Marcella smiled with visible relief and squeezed his hand hard, explaining she didn't need an immediate answer but wanted to know what ground they were standing on. Maria interrupted the serious moment, asking for more coconut ice cream, and both adults laughed with gratitude for the opportune and necessary childish distraction. That night, Sebastião drove back to his huge empty house, feeling the weight of his lie heavier than ever before. He sat on the terrace with a shot of cachaça, looking at the lights of São Paulo extending to the distant and infinite horizon. He thought about everything he had, the 3 successful companies, the bank account with more zeros than he could reasonably spend, and he thought about everything that really mattered. Marcella's smile when she saw him arrive, Maria's spontaneous hugs after helping her with school homework. Money meant nothing compared to this, to the family he was slowly building with 2 extraordinary women who deserved his complete truth. He decided that next time they saw each other, he would tell everything, that he would face the consequences of his deception, however painful they inevitably were. But fate had other plans that would change everything before he could fulfill his silent promise to himself. Because the next day, Sebastian would discover a secret about Marcella that would not only deeply surprise him, but would show him she had also been tested by life in ways he never imagined possible. Saturday morning, Sebastian arrived early at Marcella's apartment to take them to the zoo, as they had planned during the week, with emotion. He rang the doorbell and waited, hearing Maria's laughter inside, mixed with her mother's calm voice preparing final breakfast. But when Marcella opened the door, her expression was different, more serious than usual in these meetings that always began with smiles. She invited him in, explaining that Maria was finishing getting dressed in her small but tidy little room, as always in this humble apartment. Sebastian entered immediately, noticing the tension in her shoulders. Something was different in the usually relaxed atmosphere of this home. Marcella served him a cup of coffee and sat in front of him at the small kitchen table with a thoughtful expression. She began speaking with soft but firm voice, telling something she had kept to herself until now, for reasons he would soon understand perfectly well. She explained that approximately a year ago, when Maria had just turned 5 years old, she met a man at a parent-teacher meeting at the private school. His name was Roberto. He was a successful businessman, owner of several construction supply stores in the city, divorced without children of his own, but supposedly interested in forming a family again with someone. They started going out after several casual conversations at school events where they both coincided frequently because of their children in the same class. At first, everything seemed perfect, like in the fairy tales Maria loved to read before sleeping every night. Roberto was attentive, polite, generous, with invitations to beautiful restaurants Marcella had never been able to visit for lack of her own economic resources. He sent flowers to the beauty salon, surprising her in front of her colleagues who envied her luck with cheerful and joking comments. He bought gifts that she at first refused, considering them too expensive for someone she had only known for weeks. But he insisted, saying a woman like her deserved to be treated like a queen after so much sacrifice and effort alone. Marcella admitted with honesty that for a moment she let herself be carried away by the fantasy that she had finally found the right man, someone who not only accepted her but also Maria, who understood her situation as a single mother without judging her for past mistakes. Roberto spoke of future plans, of trips they would take together when they formalized the relationship in a more serious and committed way. He mentioned the possibility of helping her open her own business if things progressed well between them two in this romance. For 3 months, Marcella allowed herself to believe her life was finally changing for the better after hard and lonely years. Until the day came when Roberto formally met Maria on an outing, planned especially for this important purpose. Marcella paused long in her account and took a sip of coffee that must have been cold and tasteless. Her eyes filled with contained tears. She didn't let fall out of pride or habit of a strong woman, accustomed to not crying. She continued telling with slightly trembling voice that on that day everything changed abruptly and painfully, in a way she would never forget as long as she lived. She took Maria to the park where Roberto was waiting for them with ice creams and smiles that turned out to be completely false and calculated from the start. At first, the man was kind to the girl, asked basic questions about her school and her favorite toys with feigned interest. But as the hours passed, Marcella noticed things that deeply bothered her in the depths of her always alert maternal intuition. Roberto became impatient when Maria asked normal childish questions from a curious 6-year-old who wants to know the whole world. He sighed with barely disguised annoyance when the girl asked for help climbing on the playground equipment or wanted to show her drawings brought especially. He responded with curt monosyllables when Maria tried to include him in her imaginary games of princesses and brave knights who saved kingdoms. And worst of all, the comment that definitively broke any illusion Marcella might have about this seemingly perfect man. When Maria ran off to the swings, Roberto told Marcella with casual and carefree tone that he hoped the girl wasn't so demanding. He added that when they eventually lived together, Maria would have to learn not to interrupt so much and be more emotionally independent from her mother. Sebastião listened to the story, feeling a mixture of growing indignation and deep understanding of what would come next in this painful account. Marcella continued explaining that at that exact moment, everything became crystalline and transparent, like pure spring water. Roberto didn't really want Maria in his life. He only tolerated her as a necessary obstacle to get to her, the vulnerable single mother. He didn't see the girl as an inseparable part of the package, but as a minor inconvenience he could eventually minimize or control with strict rules. Marcella ended the encounter courteously, without showing her devastating disappointment in front of her innocent daughter, who didn't deserve to feel rejected again. But that same night, after putting Maria to bed with the usual story and kisses on her forehead, she called Roberto and ended the relationship without beating around the bush or long explanations. She simply said he wasn't the right man for her, and she didn't want to see him ever in her life. He tried to convince her, offering more gifts, more promises, more money for the business she dreamed of having someday soon. But Marcella stood firm in her immovable decision like rock, because she understood something fundamental that no money could ever change. Any man who didn't love Maria with all his heart, who didn't see her as a blessing and not as a heavy burden, any man who didn't understand that loving the mother meant unconditionally loving the daughter, that man had no place in their lives, no matter how much money he had or how many promises he made with beautiful masked words. She refused his money, his offers, his supposed love that was only possession disguised as cinematographic and false romance. Marcella looked at Sebastião directly in the eyes with intensity that pierced him to his completely naked soul, defenseless before them as possible. She said she was telling this now because she needed him to understand something absolutely crucial and non-negotiable in her present and future life. She had already passed the test of refusing wealth when that wealth came, with contempt for the most important thing in her entire existence. She didn't need a rich man who would give her material things but belittle her daughter with subtle and harmful words or attitudes. She needed a real man, no matter how much he had in his bank account or what car he drove daily to work. A man who saw Maria as she had, as a priceless treasure and not as a problem to solve or tolerate. And from the first day, Sebastião met her daughter. From that moment in the park weeks ago, when he crouched to her height, when he treated her with genuine respect, when he helped her with her homework without complaining, when he played with her without constantly checking his watch, Marcella knew he had passed the most important test without even knowing he was being evaluated every second of every encounter. Sebastián felt his heart explode in his chest with a mixture of overwhelming love and devastating guilt, because while Marcella confided this painful truth from her past to him, he kept lying about who he really was in the present they now shared. Sebastião couldn't sustain the weight of his lie anymore after hearing Marcella's story that morning, full of painful truths. He spent the whole day at the zoo with them, trying to act normal, smiling when Maria pointed at animals with childish enthusiasm. But inside he was crumbling piece by piece like an old building that finally collapses under its own accumulated weight. That night, after leaving them at their apartment with the usual kiss on Marcella's cheek and Maria's hug, he drove straight to his huge house, feeling nauseous. He locked himself in his private office with a bottle of cachaça he didn't open because alcohol wouldn't solve any of this. He grabbed his phone 1,000 times to call and confess everything by cowardly message, but each time he left it on the table, knowing she deserved the truth face to face. He spent the entire night awake in his bed, too big for a man alone, looking at the dark ceiling and going over every moment shared with them. Everything built during months rested on a giant lie he was about to knock down with his own trembling hands. At dawn on Sunday, he made the final and irreversible decision. He couldn't continue living this double life that was slowly killing him inside. He called Marcella at 8 in the morning when he knew she would be awake preparing coffee for Maria like every day. He asked with serious voice that they see each other alone that afternoon without Maria because he needed to talk to her about something very important that couldn't wait. Marcella immediately detected the different tone in his voice, that gravity she had never heard in him during all these months together. She asked with evident concern if something bad had happened or if he was healthy, offering to see him immediately if he needed it. Sebastião assured her he was physically fine, but that they really needed to talk alone about their relationship and their future together. They agreed to meet at 4 in the afternoon at the same restaurant where they met, closing the circle in a poetic, though painful way. Sebastião spent the following hours mentally preparing every word he would say, practicing the confession in front of the mirror like a nervous actor before the performance. But he knew there was no correct way to say this. There were no magic words that would soften the inevitable and devastating blow. He dressed in the same simple clothes he wore for his dates, maintaining the character until the last moment before completely destroying it. He arrived at the restaurant 20 minutes before the agreed time and asked for the same table by the window where everything began months ago. The waiter recognized him and smiled, asking about the young lady who always accompanied him on his regular visits to the family establishment. Sebastião responded vaguely that she would arrive soon and ordered just water while waiting with his stomach tied in an impossible knot to untie. Marcella arrived exactly at 4, with characteristic punctuality. She wore a simple dress and her loose hair falling over her shoulders naturally. She was beautiful but worried, her eyes searching his face for some clue about what would come in this serious conversation. They sat face to face like that first night, but now there was shared history between them. Important moments, deep feelings that were about to be severely tested. Sebastião took her hands on the table and breathed deeply, feeling this was the moment that would change everything forever in their lives. He began saying there was something he needed to confess for some time, something he was hiding out of fear and inexcusable cowardice. Marcella frowned without understanding yet, but squeezed his hands, giving silent permission to continue with whatever it was. Sebastião told everything without pauses or cheap justifications that would sound like excuses from a weak and lying man. Confessed. He explained he wasn't an Uber driver, that this complete story was an elaborate lie from the beginning of their relationship together, that in reality he owned 3 successful companies in São Paulo, that he lived in a huge house in an exclusive residential area of the city, that he had enough money to never work again in his life if he decided tomorrow without financial consequences, that everything he had said about debts, economic difficulties, rented apartment in Vila Madalena was completely false and specifically invented. He explained the reasons behind his elaborate deception, the previous women who only wanted his money without caring about him as a real person. His decision to pretend to be poor to find genuine love, not contaminated by material interest or disguised economic ambition. He spoke of his test designed to filter gold diggers, of how she had passed without even knowing she was being constantly evaluated. He confessed he had fallen deeply in love with her during these shared months, but the guilt of lying was destroying him, that after hearing her story about Roberto yesterday, he couldn't continue living with this giant lie between them two. Marcella slowly withdrew her hands from his, her face going through a rapid sequence of emotions impossible to completely hide. Initial surprise, disbelief, gradual understanding, and finally something worse than anger. A deep disappointment that settled in her brown eyes. She didn't yell or make a dramatic scene, as he half expected in the worst of his mentally rehearsed scenarios during the night. She simply stared in long silence that hurt more than any accusatory word she could launch with just reason. Finally, she spoke with calm but ice-cold voice from the harshest winter that Sebastião had ever experienced in his life. She asked how much of what they shared was real and how much was part of his perfectly rehearsed performance to deceive her. Sebastião swore his feelings were always genuine, that everything he felt for her and Maria was true and real. But Marcella shook her head sadly, explaining she couldn't trust anything now that she knew he had lied constantly. She said the worst wasn't the hidden money, but the lack of trust demonstrated during entire months together, that she had given her complete heart believing she knew the real man, only to discover he was a carefully invented character. She stood up with slow and dignified movements. She took her purse from the chair back without looking him directly in the eyes. She said she needed time to process all this, that he shouldn't contact her for an indefinite time, and left the restaurant, leaving Sebastião alone with his truth finally confessed, but his love possibly lost forever in the painful process. The following days were the longest and darkest Sebastião had lived in his 36 years of existence on Earth. He checked his phone every 5 minutes, waiting for a message that never came from Marcella or sign of forgiveness. He tried calling countless times, but she never answered. She sent every call straight to voicemail he didn't dare fill. He sent long messages explaining his reasons again, apologizing in 1,000 different ways, begging for an opportunity to talk again about this. But the messages remained delivered without ever changing to read, as if she deliberately ignored them without even reading his desperate words. He tried going to her apartment, but when he rang the bell, neighbor Dona Conceição opened, explaining Marcella didn't want to see him currently. She kindly asked him to respect her space and her decision to temporarily withdraw until she could think with clarity. Sebastião left a handwritten letter with the lady, begging her to deliver it when Marcella was ready to read it. He returned to his house feeling worse than ever. The money and material possessions mocked him from every expensive corner. Everything he had meant absolutely nothing without those two in his daily life, shared with love. His friends tried to console him, but didn't really understand the magnitude of what he had lost through his stupidity and prolonged cowardice. They said he would find someone else, that there were many available women in the big cosmopolitan city of São Paulo. But Sebastião knew Marcella was unique, irreplaceable, the woman he had been looking for unknowingly during all his adult life. Maria, that beautiful girl who had accepted him with so much genuine affection, who called him to brag about her school grades, who asked for his help with homework because she trusted him as a father figure she never had in her short existence. He missed them both, with a real physical pain he felt in the center of his chest constantly without possible relief through pills. He couldn't concentrate at work. Business meetings seemed completely irrelevant and insignificant compared to his personal loss. He signed documents without reading them, delegated important decisions to managers, cancelled commitments he previously considered crucial for his business empire. His assistant asked if he was sick because she had never seen him so distracted and disconnected from his responsibilities. Sebastião didn't know how to explain he was sick of the heart, that he suffered from an illness no doctor could cure with prescriptions. On the 5th day of absolute silence that felt like complete years of emotional torture, Sebastião decided to try something different in his strategy. He investigated which beauty salon Marcella worked at and sent a huge flower arrangement that arrived during her morning shift. Not cliché red roses, but yellow sunflowers he remembered her mentioning were her favorites because they reminded her of happy days. The card simply said, "I miss you," and regret more than words can adequately express in this limited space. He also sent a package with art materials for Maria, professional watercolors, and good quality brushes the girl could use. He included a note for the little one explaining he missed seeing her and hoped she continued drawing her beautiful princesses and imaginary worlds. But he didn't receive any response from either of the two people who mattered most in his currently collapsed world. On the 7th day, his friend Ricardo found him at his house drinking cachaça alone on the terrace in the middle of the afternoon under the sun. He took the bottle from his hands and told him with necessary harshness that he had to accept that perhaps Marcela would never completely forgive him, that some lies were too big to overcome, that some ruptures of trust were irreparable, regardless of original intentions. But Sebastián wasn't ready to surrender yet in this battle for the true love he had finally found after years. On the 10th day of her absence, that hurt like an open wound, without healing, he received a brief message from Marcela, finally breaking the silence. It said scarcely, "Can we talk tomorrow at 6 in the park where you saw us with Maria that first time together?" Sebastián read the message 1,000 times, analyzing every word, looking for clues about her real intentions for this pending and crucial encounter. It said nothing about forgiving him or giving another chance. It only proposed to talk without specifying tone or final purpose. He spent that night without sleeping, preparing everything he would say, the promises he would make, the guarantees he would offer to recover her betrayed trust. He got up early and bathed with extra care, choosing clean, casual clothes that would show respect for her and this moment. He arrived at the park half an hour before the agreed meeting and sat on the same bench where Maria had formerly met him. He remembered that perfect day when the girl showed him her drawing of 3 people holding hands under the bright sun, how he had secretly wished to be that paternal figure on the paper of vivid and cheerful colors, always optimistic. He saw Marcela approaching, walking alone along the cement trail, and his heart beat with renewed force, knowing this conversation would determine if their story would end there or if they would have the opportunity to write new chapters together. Maria wasn't coming with her this time, and that gave him a bad feeling about Marcela's real intentions in this meeting. She sat on the bench, maintaining notable physical distance between both bodies that before sought each other naturally without thinking about spaces. She stared at the playground area where some children played with their parents on this quiet Tuesday afternoon. Sebastián waited, not knowing if he should speak first or let her begin the conversation pending for eternal days. Finally, Marcela spoke with calm but firm voice, without turning to look directly in his eyes, still emotionally closed. She said she had spent the last 10 days constantly thinking about everything he confessed at the restaurant that Sunday, that she had cried more than she had cried in complete years of economic difficulties and accumulated nightly solitudes, that she felt betrayed not only by the lie about money, but by the complete performance during entire months. She explained that every time he pretended concern about expenses, every time he declined going places for supposed invented economic limitations, every time they shared the bill dividing riets fairly as equal poor people struggling together, he had consciously lied to her honest face. Marcela finally looked at him with those brown eyes that once shone with love, and now only showed deep sadness mixed with disappointment. She asked directly how she could trust again someone capable of sustaining such an elaborate lie for so long, prolonged, without remorse. Sebastián opened his mouth to respond, but the words got stuck, seeing silent tears rolling down the cheeks of the woman he loved, knowing his answer in the next minutes would decide all their future, shared or separated, forever. Sebastián wiped Marcela's tears with his trembling hand, feeling the complete weight of his mistake in each salty drop he touched. He said with broken voice that he perfectly understood her pain and justified distrust after months of elaborate deception, that he didn't expect immediate forgiveness or trust restored with beautiful words, only in an afternoon of empty promises and late regret. but he begged her to let him demonstrate with daily actions who he really was without masks or designed performances, that the man who fell in love with her was genuine. Only the false economic story was invented to protect himself. Marcella listened in silence while he confessed that these 10 days without seeing them were the emptiest and most miserable of all his privileged adult life, that he had discovered something fundamental about himself during that painful time of forced and lonely reflection. All his money and business success meant absolutely nothing without her and Maria in his shared daily world. That he preferred to be poor with those two than a millionaire and alone in his huge empty house that hurt. Sebastian promised he would never lie again about anything, big or small, important or trivial, without exceptions. Marcella breathed deeply and dried the remaining tears with the back of her hand, tired from crying so much these days. She spoke with firmer voice, saying she had also reflected a lot about what true love really meant without romantic idealizations, that she had had plenty of time to get angry, to hate the betrayal, to feel foolish for not detecting signs of elaborate lie, but she also had time to remember every shared moment, every genuine gesture, every sincere look that couldn't be completely faked. She recalled how he treated Maria with respect and authentic affection, that no actor could sustain for months without revealing falsehood, how he played with her without getting tired, how he listened with real attention when she told childish stories without adult sense, how he helped with homework without ever complaining about time invested in a child who wasn't his biologically speaking. Marcella admitted those small details showed her the real man behind the economic lie that had protected him. She said what hurt her most wasn't discovering he was rich, but feeling he didn't trust her. She explained she had never asked for a perfect man without defects or past mistakes he now regretted in the present. She didn't need a fairy tale prince with castle and fortune, guaranteed forever never in distant land. She just wanted an honest companion who chose to be with her and Maria in good and bad moments without conditions. Someone who would love them when they had money and when they didn't have it in empty accounts at month's end. Someone who would be present in illnesses, in joys, in grey routine days without exciting adventures to tell. She asked directly, looking in his eyes, if he was really willing to be that true naked man. If he could promise that from now on there would be no more lies or secrets kept in closed closets, that she couldn't bear another betrayal because her heart had already been broken too many times in her short life. Sebastian took her hands firmly and swore, yes, that he was completely willing to be vulnerable and honest. He said he had learned the most painful and important lesson of his entire existence during these days without her in his world. That trust was the foundation on which any lasting and real love was built, without false illusions. That without mutual trust there was no possible future between two people, no matter how much they loved each other, with intense passion. He proposed starting over, but this time without lies, without tests, without psychological games designed for selfish protection. To really know each other as complete people with virtues and defects, exposed without social filters that distorted realities. Marcella asked what would happen with their enormous economic difference now that everything was on the table without secrets. Sebastian responded with honesty, that the money existed but wouldn't define their relationship or change who he was as a person, that he would continue working because he loved his businesses, that they would live according to what she considered comfortable without pressures or forced changes. And if she wanted to open her salon, he would support her, but as a partner who believed in her talent and not as a rich benefactor. Marcella smiled for the first time in 10 long days, and Sebastian felt hope flourish again in his chest, aching from waiting. She said she still needed time to process everything completely, but was willing to try again with conditions. First condition, to know the real Sebastian without performances or invented characters for special occasions or designed tests. Second condition, that Maria also have a voice in this decision because it directly affected her life as an integral part. Third condition, that they build trust gradually with patience and without time pressures or accelerated romantic expectations. Sebastião accepted all conditions without hesitating a second, grateful to have this second chance he didn't deserve. Marcella stood up and he did the same, maintaining respectful distance, waiting for signals from her about what followed. She walked toward him slowly and hugged him hard, letting more tears fall, but this time of mixed relief. Sebastião enveloped her in his arms, feeling he had finally found his true home, not in walls of luxurious house, but in the heart of this extraordinary woman. The following 3 months were a slow process of rebuilding damaged trust, but not completely destroyed by truth. Sebastião met Marcella without masks, showing his house, his businesses, his real life he had hidden with such elaborate care. She was initially surprised by the magnitude of his success, but didn't change her treatment of him, as he feared. She continued treating him as the man she met at the restaurant that first night months ago. Maria also had to process the revelation, adapted to her childish understanding of 6 years recently completed. They explained Sebastião wasn't poor, as he had said, but his heart was always honest with her, without lies. The girl forgave him, with the beautiful ease of children who love without conditions when they feel genuine love. She asked if now that he was rich, he could buy the big doll she saw in the store for weeks. Sebastião and Marcella laughed together at the childish innocence, and he promised yes, but only for her upcoming birthday. They learned to balance economic differences with honest conversations about expenses, limits, and values they wanted to transmit to Maria. Sebastião fulfilled his promise to support Marcella's dream without imposing his resources as a magic solution to all her problems. Together, they looked for the perfect location for her beauty salon, but she insisted on paying the rent with her personal savings. He respected her decision, although it hurt to see her work double to achieve it with so much unnecessary effort, according to his economic perspective. But he understood this was important to her, to demonstrate she could achieve it on her own merit without depending on his money. He offered a loan with formal contract and fair interest rates she finally accepted after negotiating terms. The salon opened its doors 6 months after their reconciliation with modest celebration among friends and family. Marcella cried with happiness, seeing her name on the painted sign outside the space she had dreamed of for years. Sebastião hugged her with genuine pride, seeing her achieve her goals with determination and hard work he deeply admired. Maria cut the inaugural ribbon with big scissors, helped by both adults who held her with love. 1 year after that painful confession at the restaurant, Sebastião knelt in the same park where everything changed for them. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, and Maria was at the bench with Dona Conceição, who knew the secret plan. He took out a simple but beautiful ring he had chosen, thinking of Marcella's simple style without unnecessary ostentation. He said this year had been the best of his entire life, despite the difficult and painful beginning, that she had taught him the true meaning of love that isn't bought or sold in markets, that Maria had shown him the pure joy of being a father, although they didn't share biological blood in their veins. He asked her to marry him, not for the money he had, but for the man he really was, that he wanted to spend the rest of his days demonstrating it had been worth giving this fool a second chance. Marcella cried, saying yes between nervous laughs, while he placed the ring on her trembling finger. Maria ran to them, shouting with emotion because she would finally have the daddy she always wanted. The wedding was intimate and beautiful, celebrated in a small chapel with only close relatives and true friends who supported them. Marcella shone radiant in a simple but elegant dress that made her shine with her own light, without needing expensive jewelry. Maria was the proudest maid of honor in the entire world, carrying the rings with the seriousness of a responsible adult. Sebastião cried when Marcella walked to the altar on her father's arm, who came from Rio especially. The vows they exchanged were written by themselves. Personal promises about honesty, patience, unconditional love in all circumstances. Sebastião promised to be the faithful husband and present father Maria always deserved in her childish life. Marcela promised to trust and forgive, to build together a home full of true love, regardless of economic or personal challenges. The priest declared them husband and wife before God and present witnesses who applauded with genuine joy. They kissed, sealing their commitment, while Maria hugged them both, crying with pure happiness. 2 years later, Sebastião woke up in his house, which was now a true home full of life and constant childish laughter. Marcela slept beside him with peaceful expression, and Maria came running into the room, jumping on the bed like every Saturday. The now 8-year-old girl hugged him, calling him daddy, with the naturalness of someone who never knew any different reality from this. Sebastião hugged her back, feeling deep gratitude for this life he almost lost through his stupidity and initial fear. Marcela's beauty salon prospered with loyal clients. She had completely paid off her loan with deserved pride. They simply had breakfast together, all three in the kitchen, sharing plans for the day without rush or stressful obligations to fulfill. Sebastião looked at his wife and daughter and knew he had found what he had been looking for during years in wrong places. True love isn't born from feigned poverty or ostentatious wealth that superficially impresses. It's born from brutal honesty, shared vulnerability, consciously choosing someone every day without conditions. It survives only through truth sustained with constant work. Lies eventually collapse, but truth builds eternal foundations that no storm can ever completely destroy. If you enjoyed this story, support me with a like and send this video to someone who needs to remember that life's greatest treasure isn't kept in safes, but in the people we love. Write in the comments which scene moved you most. Also, tell me your name and where you're watching me from. I want to feel your presence here. Gratitude for walking with me this far. We'll meet in the next story, the one that arrives at the right moment and touches the heart.